Hi, welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Judy Nathans.
And over here, I'm Robert Winters. And it's still March 1st. And you know what they
That's
say
right.
about March?
In
In
like a lion,
out like
out
a
like
lamb.
well, that Putin did sure come in like a lion a few days ago. So hopefully he does go out like a lamb. That would be great.
Right. I think the Russians come in as bears, though, don't they?
Oh, that's probably true.
Yeah,
You're right.
that's right.
All right, in like a bear.
So anyway, some of the other things that came up as items, some of these items that were before this Cambridge City Council last night were basically punted. So there will be a this order having to do with basically introducing a zoning amendment or a municipal ordinance zoning amendment. I think it's more a municipal ordinance than zoning,
Yeah,
having to do with
zoning,
the
right?
neighborhood conservation districts.
Right.
That actually was referred
Right.
on a very split vote, which is very curious, to
5-4.
the neighborhood and long-term
Right.
planning committee
To have a meeting, right?
Yeah, and which was, I thought that was interesting because to me that was the only logical place to send it.
Yes.
Yet there were 4 votes, and the way they said no, it seemed like it was like a certain emphasis in the no.
Well, it was the 3 co-signers. They had to say no.
They didn't have to say no, because ultimately when you introduce an order or anything like that, you still refer it to a committee.
Yeah, but then it would make it look like their order was not. I don't know.
Well, I think maybe there's some who just wanted to kind of rush that one through to ordinance without the appropriate processing that I think something of this significance deserves. And it was no surprise to me that it was a sort of the diehard ABC people who were the ones who wanted to rush it through to ordinance right away without it being referred for any kind of review. There may have also been some issue because the chair of the Neighborhood Long-Term Planning Council is Councillor Carlone, who's sort of not of the body, as a famous Star Trek episode.
Talking about ABC, and there's more than 4 councillors that were endorsed by ABC.
Yeah, right. But there's sort of the inside trackers who are the I like to think of them as the do as you're told councillors. And then they're the ones who are a little bit more independent thinkers, who are capable of looking at the bigger picture. That includes people like Sumbul Siddiqui, and it certainly includes people like Paul Toner, so who had the endorsement of that group, but I think are a lot more, they're bigger thinkers basically than some of the others. So, so anyway, so that'll get its day and we'll see where it goes. And, as Charlie Sullivan of the Historical Commission has pointed out, it's like that ordinance, just like any other ordinance, needs to be reviewed periodically. But reviewing an ordinance to make it better
does not mean changing it all.
This doesn't mean disemboweling it, So anyway, we'll see. We live in very political times, so that's the way it is. So we'll see what happens. There was also an issue about, speaking of the charter aspect, about city council's newfound authority to review board appointments. There was also the newfound ability for them to initiate a charter review every 10 years beginning this year.
Right.
And the city solicitor had opined on possible ways in which a charter review committee of citizens could be formed. I kind of intuitively get the sense that some of the councilors want to have as much control as possible in this. But they don't have a procedure they're settled on yet about how to do it. What will happen if somebody like if I were to say I'd like to be on this, whatever, will the ability to serve on a charter review committee come down to whose political sphere you live in, or will it come down to your expertise and some knowledge in the matter? And time will tell, right?
I think each councilor should nominate somebody from a list or something.
Well, you can nominate, but ultimately I would imagine you still would need like a majority vote or something like
True.
that.
Yeah,
You know, so
yeah.
there's a difference between nomination and
Right.
selection. So,
That's true.
you know, and by the way, speaking of that little controversy about how you pick those people, there's also the question about the screening committee, preliminary screening committee for the
The
city
city
manager
manager.
search.
Yes.
You know, and they haven't quite said how that's going to happen either,
Well,
but
aren't
that
they
has
now
to happen.
accepting nomination to be self-nominated?
I
That's
know that
open, right?
did they open that today?
Oh, maybe it isn't open yet. I thought it was.
Yeah, well, whatever it is, they said there was some scope that needed to be drafted or something, but then
Yeah.
but presumably that would
But the
happen.
selection committee for that committee has already been selected from the city councilors.
There are four
Right.
members of the city
Toner,
council who are part of that.
Zondervan,
Yes,
Azim, and
Toner,
I said Toner.
yeah, Toner, Azim, and yeah, I forget. But anyway, it's four
Yeah.
of them. You know, so we'll see. Let's see if they play fair. We'll see. But anyway, so those are some of the kind of more process things. I think in terms of substance, there was you tuned in, I believe, and
Yeah.
I listened to there was a committee meeting on the finance committee just about was it a week or
Well,
so
it was
ago?
2 weeks ago, they had the first one where there was no public comment. And then they had public comment last week.
Right. And what was kind of curious about that is I think it is a well-known fact, though I will certainly give a pass to a counselor who's brand new, who may not know this, but anyone who has served on the city council for more than a year
Yeah.
knows that the budget process gets underway at the end of the summer, early fall, and by the time you get around to February, it's already, you know, largely baked. You know, say for
that was the issue of having a meeting to discuss that we have to get involved earlier. That's what Nolan and Carlone said.
right. So I did hear last night there seemed to be some indication that the finance committee chairs were
Yes.
committed to sometime late this coming summer to start
Summer,
actually
early
get it,
fall.
you know,
Right.
to whatever degree they want to have additional city council input into the crafting of the budget, that they would really have to do
Right.
it pretty much like August, September, October,
Right.
rather than February, March. Right.
Right.
You know,
Makes
so,
sense. Yeah.
but you know, one of the things about that, which I find perplexing,
Yeah.
is that, you know, city councilors pass orders throughout the year in which they express their desire for the manager to do certain things, to fund
Yeah.
certain things, to prioritize certain things. They're doing it all the time. They get together, they form goals and objectives every once in a while, and whatever. So this notion that somehow they have to get together like in August and September to tell the manager what they want.
Well, but in their defense, and this is, you know, they can put all the policy orders they want, but they don't always get responses back.
And they can get together at the end of the summer and the early fall, and they can say what they want, and they won't necessarily get responses either.
No,
You know,
but I think at least gives them more leeway. I don't
know that it really does. I think the one thing that matters, I think, if I was a city manager, I would say, where is their consensus? Okay, so to whatever degree there's a process that actually shows actual consensus, you know, then that's something the manager typically would respect. If it's a matter of what I used to call drive-by orders, which is sort of like, Mr. Manager, you do this, you know, it's sponsored by one or two people. Everything gets voted 9-0 anyway, so that doesn't mean a thing, right? You know, but it'd be different if, in fact, there was a concerted effort amongst councilors within the confines of the open meeting law, mind you, to actually say what they really wanted. You know, and they could have been doing that all along. So, you know, so there seems to be just a little bit of a color of control here too. Like, you know, and I think that people do need to understand that there is a distinction between a legislative function and an executive function here. Even in the city of Boston or any place with a directly elected mayor, the mayor introduces the budget. And the councilor hashes it out. And yes, there's advice and consent and all of that stuff here, but you know, the
And the
notion
other,
that somehow that
yeah.
the councilors would get together around a table and say, I think we ought to be putting 20 million in this and 10 million in that, that's kind of not the job. And I don't, and
No,
I
but I
think
think that,
it shouldn't be.
but they should actually maybe be more together on what they do see as some priorities, rather than coming up with these different policy orders all throughout the year.
You mean they should actually act as a cohesive body? That's a
Yeah, that's
great
true.
idea, Judy. I think that would
Yeah,
be
yeah.
wonderful.
But
Yeah.
the other thing I wish people do, and this has come up time and time again, is that people that don't know the system that well just feel like just because there's a policy order and just because it gets voted on they think it's like set in stone. They don't realize it just means we're sending this to the city manager and the departments to have a comment on. And
Right.
yes, that should be more timely,
So,
but
so,
it's not
so,
a fait accompli, and people think that's what it is.
so here I
We
will
say
invoke.
it, you have to do it, and it's
So,
just,
so since some
yeah,
people seem to think I know a few things about the charter, I'm going to
yeah,
actually say something about that, which is that
okay,
one of the primary functions of city council orders is not to instruct the manager
to
to do
do,
something. It's
right,
simply the fact that, or any of the city department heads to do something. It's
yeah,
just that there is a strict felonious prohibition that says, as a city
right.
councilor, you can't basically ring up the head of community development department and
Say,
say,
how about
Aram,
this? Yeah,
damn it, I insist you put X number of dollars in here and there. That's a felony.
yeah, but what if they
See,
just had a
so
conversation about putting it?
well, you got to be careful about that, because
That's,
there's a certain amount of kind of, you know, uh, you're pressing it sometimes when you're having a
right,
conversation.
but there's
Well,
always been an art. I know Mallin's brought this up sometimes through the term of well, if you had consulted the department before, you wouldn't have put it this policy order that had no basis. So
all right. Well,
how do
so
you get that information?
to that,
How
I
do
will
you
tell
get
you a quick story without naming names.
it? Okay,
But once upon a time, there was a city
yeah,
councilor who, outside the Sullivan chamber, went and sort of buttonholed one of the department heads,
yeah.
basically to sort of say what that councilor wanted that department head to do.
I think I've heard this story. Go ahead.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the counselor turned to me, kind of laughed and said, we better move over here. He knows too much about the charter. Right.
All right.
Because they're really not supposed to do that. What they're supposed to do is
Yeah.
go into the council chamber, confer with their colleagues, and then have them come to some consensus to get 5 votes. And then that goes to the manager, and then the manager then directs the city
No, I
department
understand
heads
that.
that this is, you should prioritize this.
Yeah, but for instance, the one on the golf course thing, everyone brought up, or that some people ever said, why didn't you consult this, and that? Could they have done that? Because what you're saying is that they can't consult anybody before they put in a policy order.
They can request information, but if you think about it, even city council orders fall into categories. Some are requests for information.
True.
So
okay.
even the way a city councilor seeks information
That's a good
properly
point.
should basically be a majority of the city council
Okay.
requesting that information be forwarded from such and such a department to the
So
city
that,
council.
so maybe
or
more
one
of
of its
that should be
committees.
done as requests rather than.
But that's
this
really
should
what they
happen.
are. That is what they are. That's what city
but that's-
councils are.
But that's not how people see them.
Right. It's a form of communication to
Yeah,
the
they see it
executive.
as an order, policy order. We order you to do this.
So they need to learn more about the charter.
Well,
And yet-
good luck on that. They need to
Well-
learn more about what the city manager
Well,
does.
you know, but
what
the truth of the
title
matter
Yeah.
is there was a time when most city councilors understood that that was the role of city councilors, and that was what city
Yeah.
councilors orders were about.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you do have, you know, not that I'm a defender of the so-called nuclear option that you can always fire the city manager for being unresponsive,
Right.
but ultimately that's what you would do if you had a city manager who was thoroughly non-responsive so much of the time
Any of
that you
your,
couldn't work with them
right.
anymore.
Right.
You know, I don't think that I don't think any rational person
Mhm.
could make that claim about either Bob Healy,
Yeah.
Richard Rossi, or Louis
Right.
DiPasquale.
Yeah.
And I would say that if you wanted to really make that case, maybe you
Mhm.
could maybe do it with Bob Healy, who
Yeah.
could be, you know, kind of, bit of a penny pincher at times,
Yeah.
you know, but with each passing city manager from Richie to Louis, they've been far more flexible, more willing to bend, more willing to dip into the till and spend
Yeah.
more money to,
Yep.
to basically satisfy the individual, well, I shouldn't say individual demands, but the demands of a majority of the city council, as they ask it, so, there's been, there's less pushback with each successive administration. Maybe that's part of the reason why they want to change the charter, because they just,
Yeah.
they want to,
Yeah.
say, oh, really great, we can do this. Well, let's get rid of all the authority of the manager. By the way, there was at least one counselor at that finance committee that we mentioned here who seemed to think, well, maybe it's time we just, get rid of this entire form of government, right?
Yeah,
That
I'm
was
trying to remember
Mr.
because I did.
Zondervan. That was Zondervan.
Okay, I watched. I mean, there was a real back and forth between him and Louis, wasn't there? I mean, Louis got
There was.
exasperated at a point. Yeah.
I think the real problem there is
Yeah.
there is a continuing lack of understanding about the role of councilors and the role
Well,
of city manager.
But I remember the city manager, he kept saying, we listened to you. You wanted more money for affordable health. What did we do?
And you got
We
it.
did this. We
And they got it.
We listened to you, but I mean, he kept bringing up that one point, but
Right.
it's like, and the open space thing. Yes, we got that space and it's all, yeah, I just felt like he probably was saying to himself, oh, I'm so glad I'm out of here.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for the city manager who's actually bent over backwards to do more things for more people than any manager in recent history.
And given the last 2 years of COVID.
And
it's just
has
it's
done a
never
lot
enough.
of this. That's right. And by the way,
Never enough.
speaking of
Yeah.
which, doing this, though there was a little bit of shakiness on a few of the points on the bond ratings.
Yeah.
The bond rating, it's usually this time of year, every year,
Yep.
where the city gets back its bond ratings from the three major credit rating agencies, Fitch, Moody's, and Standard and Poor's. And when we are one of the rare cities in the country that is
26 or something.
who get the highest AAA bond rating from all three rating agencies. Yeah, it's really just a few handfuls in the whole country, and it's a real point of pride. And and in spite of the reputation that some people in Cambridge like to think of as the great liberal city that spends wildly, part of the reason we get the good ratings is because we are fiscally sound, and you might say conservative, but not conservative in the sort of the evil way, but more meaning that we don't just throw money away. We think about it, we plan, we do things thoughtfully, we save money for a rainy day, we do all the things that the credit rating agencies like to see, and we managed to provide greater services in the middle of a pandemic than most every place around.
7-day-a-week testing. Who did that?
Yeah, and with a particular emphasis on the people who are most vulnerable, more so than most any place. So, it's a lot to be proud of there. But of course there'll always be the critics.
Oh, there were. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so that so usually what you do when they do the AAA, the triple, as we say, sounds like basketball. They go through all 9 counselors going, congratulations, Mr. Manager, and it's like, you got to go cycle through all 9. I don't think they did that. So I think maybe that's another measure of the kind of the testiness that seems to be developing between counselors and manager, And we still don't know what's going to happen in terms of the manager search, or the outcome of the manager search, whether there's going to be, somebody local or somebody from far away.
Have they advertised it yet?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's advertised. I believe it's advertised now. And they're kind of trying to put the word around there. But, I'm still always reminded of what Tim Toomey used to say, which is that ultimately, in spite of all the process, it still just takes 5 votes. And it would be maybe a little bit of an embarrassment if out of this entire process, they just handed a job to a familiar name and a familiar face. Right. But ultimately they can do that. This whole process here is a good idea. And I hope it leads to good results, but ultimately it's all about getting to 5. It's really that.
I happen to notice that Watertown has a city manager. I mean, again, I don't know what their plan So they're looking for one too. Just throw them out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, I think it's
Probably a
been,
few places.
there were a few mayors, directly elected
yeah?
mayors who chose not to seek reelection, and
Really?
managers who chose to walk, and school superintendents who've chosen to walk too.
That's
And
interesting.
and I think you know, whether people want to admit it or not, you know, COVID's been tough on a lot of people. And if you're in a
Yes.
position of managing,
Yeah.
you know, maybe it has actually had an effect and it's burned a few people out,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you know, and people need a break from it all. So
Right.
anyway, so there were a few other things that notable, I think, that maybe worth mentioning kind of briefly. There was one one item that was sitting on the table awaiting action,
Yeah.
that had
What
to
was
do
that?
with the oft repeated desire to ban new natural gas hookups in
Oh,
homes.
right.
You know,
Right.
in homes and businesses, residents for heating. You know, in fact, they really want to actually, you know, ramp it up so that
Yep.
not only would you not allow it in new construction, but there's some who would like to actually have it phased out even in old construction, so that
Oh, yeah.
eventually you'd have to get rid of your gas-fired boiler, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So apparently there was a yet another ruling out of Maura Healey from the Attorney General's
Right.
office,
About Brookline.
basically, you know, amplifying the Brookline case, where in fact the municipalities do not have that authority. And so they basically just placed the matter on file, saying, well, we'll have to just wait for another day to see to push it. Or as one of the councilors pointed out, well, when Ms. Healy is elected governor, which may or may not happen,
The government. Yes.
it's a good chance it will happen because the Republicans haven't put up a whole lot of good quality yet. So
I'd say that about the Democrats too.
well, I agree. I agree. So, but by default, it goes Democrat unless you have a Bill Weld or a Charlie Baker kind of candidate up there.
Right.
And I haven't seen one yet.
So far, no.
So,
Mhm.
but you know, that they seem to think as Governor Maura Healey would very much push to actually change things so that the
I
state
don't
energy
think
codes
so.
would permit
Well, maybe.
municipalities to do this.
I have
We'll
no
see.
idea.
We'll see what happens,
Yeah.
you know. But anyway, I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
You know, I think another matter that is still a little bit unresolved, but I think I know the answer to this, has to do with some of these other things like the so-called Budo amendments, you know, where they want to put strict timelines on getting to net zero or whatever.
Well, that's
But
why today's meeting was interesting.
yeah, but ultimately there's a question here, which is that if you say, you know, MIT, you can't build that lab building unless you do it this way, but it's not possible to build the lab to meet the specs that they demand because it's a lab building and it just is not physically possible. Then they say, well, you can just buy RECs, renewable
Carbon
energy
offsets.
credits, or
Right, yeah.
purchase your energy from
Right.
renewable resources, whatever, that may cost more. And fundamentally, I believe the Attorney General, whoever the Attorney General will be in the future, or any court, will eventually say, well, that's a tax, you know, because if you're imposing regulations that absolutely there's no way to get around them other than to pay a lot more, then that would inevitably be interpreted as a tax. And I think you got yet another question about exactly what the municipal authority is in that matter, which is going to have to get settled at some point.
Yeah, that came up today in the net zero report.
Yeah.
And Zondervan objected to the report changing the lab thing by 2030 to now no longer a deadline for labs. He was very upset about that. He said it should be at least 2025. And so that whole thing about labs has got to be resolved. Because,
well, that sounds to me like
yeah.
some of the people in the university community and the research community
finally,
got through to some of the city councils. They said,
actually, even Azim actually, I think, pointed out that that should be a different.
Well, you know, Azim is fresh out of MIT. I think
right.
he's probably has some familiarity. Right. On the other hand, Councillor Zondervan also came out of MIT. He ought to understand.
A while ago, and maybe a different field. That could
well, and a different level of zeal as well.
And he's older. He's not.
Yeah, perhaps so. By the way, one thing, it was sort of a small item, happened at the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
As a late order. but I thought it
Right.
was noteworthy because I kind of knew it might be coming.
Yeah.
There's a fellow named, I think his name is Wig Zamor out of Somerville, who's sort of alerting a lot of listservs about the fact that now that the Green Line extension to
Oh, I heard that. Yeah, I
Union
didn't
Square
quite
is going
get
to be
that. Yeah.
opening in like 3 weeks, right?
Wow. Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I mean, the whole line it'll take a while. That'll be
Sure.
phased in, right? But
Okay.
it's coming.
Yeah.
They said that, the way it's configured, which is parallel to the commuter rail tracks, it
Yeah.
leaves open the possibility of extension of the Green Line from there out
Uh-huh.
along those very same tracks, so that you could actually some have suggested a goal of one day having the Green Line extend, that branch of the Green Line extend to
Mhm.
Porter Square.
Hmm.
Could even go further, quite honestly, right? So there was a late order basically urging the state legislature to, basically urging that some effort and attention be paid to actually look and, see if that possibility could come down the pike someday. And, I don't know, presidential administrations come and go, these big funds from Washington come in for infrastructure,
Mhm.
come and go. But, if there are little pots of gold available for doing big projects that normally wouldn't happen under ordinary operating budgets,
Mhm.
this is a pretty damn good time to actually dream big about some of the
Hmm.
long-term possibilities that really could change things. I mean, to me,
Hmm.
people could fight all day long about housing issues, but ultimately
Yeah.
the housing issue is just people just in a debating club ultimately, until they basically address the bigger transportation network issues, which
Right.
basically opens up much better housing opportunities, not just within Cambridge, but also in the broader
Mhm.
region. So converting some commuter rails to ordinary T, even some of the changes in fare structures and all of that.
Mhm.
I want to hear more of that stuff.
Yeah.
I want to hear less about bike lanes, and I want to hear more about the big stuff.
Well, good luck
That's
on
my
that one.
prayer.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway,
All
we're
right.
just about out of
10
time.
seconds. Yeah. All right.
So I guess we'll be back in another couple of weeks on
Ides of March.
at the
Ides
Ides
of
of
March.
March on Cambridge Inside Out.
Okay.